Lars, so a lot of the pieces so far have all kind of talked about increasing visibility of performers, and what the sort of presence of performers and audience are. I'm curious to hear a little bit about what Lars is doing with his practice as we head over to Oslo from London, because in some ways you have a different take, as I understand it, on the role of AI and machine learning and the way that you're using that in your performance practice, right? So I guess we'll let you tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so my approach to this is, I mean, I'm a performer. I've been performing music for 5-6 years around Europe and the rest of the world. So I come from a performer aspect, and I just have to do a bit of a disclaimer here that I'm not trying to say that this is the way to go forward, but I'm just proposing another idea next to sort of the interactive idea or to the classic laptop performer idea. And I set out to, because I was a bit tired of traveling around performing on a laptop, and often people would not consider a performer on a laptop as a they would think that a lot of the things you were doing were sort of pre-programmed. However, my performances were been different every time, and they were also extremely live and full of mistakes and so on. So I never really considered myself in that way, but I was perceived in this way by the audience. And out of that idea came this idea of like, is it possible to create a kind of a software that would perform for you, so you wouldn't have to travel and you could limit like your ecological footprint, and at the same time it would be exciting enough for people to watch and experience. That was sort of the initial idea. Of course, it developed in over actually a long period of time, and I didn't really know how you would do that. So, and I'm not so fond of like what exists already, which is like a virtual avatar that sort of performs for you, or, you know, I wanted to sort of create like the idea of the software itself is the performer and not like the character in the software. So sort of like the software decides a bunch of things, and then you get the performance. And every time you see this, there's like a lot of variation, and there's a lot of unexpected events that even I can't like really predict. So out of that came the software that I created, and then I've done 2 performances so far. And there will be a video for this event instead of a live performance, but there will be a video explaining parts of it. And first time was an event where it was first performing by itself. I just have to start it by pressing space, basically, and then it just runs. And second time, and then after that, I performed myself. And then the second time, I streamed during this festival called Unsound. I streamed from my home the software, and at the same time I was just having to press play, and then it would perform. But I've actually never been that nervous, because the software is not stable software. It requires a lot of resources to run. So I actually never been that nervous performing or like having something perform in my name as I did with the software. So that's pretty interesting anecdote to this idea. And the software is sort of, it uses machine learning, and it uses a game platform. And in that game platform, there's different worlds created by me. And in those worlds, there are different agents that will perform musical piece. So they have like an X amount of possibilities inside of these different spaces, and in that they kind of perform a music piece. And parts of that music piece is composed by me, and then there's even a synthesizer a software synthesizer built into the software. So it also sort of like there's a machine learning machine learning is trained on optimizing for a specific task, but that task is not to compose music, but sort of the byproduct of that task is to make a composition. This might be a bit hard to understand, but you will see it in the images. So that's sort of the purpose. I'm not interested in the intelligence of this. I'm just interested in like the variety of outcomes and the possibilities of failure and the possibilities of it performing in ways I didn't expect. So it also has pseudo physics in that world. So there's, for example, if an element in that world has a different velocity when it falls on the ground, for example, and hits another object, it would create another sound than if it has a lighter or like a faster velocity, for example. So it does have quite some parameters that is uncontrollable by me, which creates compositions that are different every time. So that's sort of the live aspect of this performance, is that you press play and you see what happens. And sometimes it also crashes, of course, which is part of the game. I mean, it's part of performing, like, you know, that's sort of what has happened to me when I have performed several times, that my computer also crashed. And sometimes I even planned crashed in my performances because I thought it was an entertaining event. So there's definitely an aspect of this. And then the other elements in this software is there's 3D scanned models from my garden and other areas around me that are sort of important for me. And then there's a lot of algorithmically generated content based on images that I've been taking that are also placed in these worlds in different uncontrollable ways. So there's a lot of different possibilities for the software to perform. However, this is very, I'm still in the beginning stages of this software, so it's continuing to develop, and my goal is that it has a huge possibility space of performing, so that the performance will be different each time, and it will be possible for me to experience it, and it will I cannot predict what's going to come next. So yeah, that's what I've been working on, and it's sort of combining my musical practice, and it's also combining my visual practice, because I'm educated visual artist. So it's trying to combine all of those into a virtual world where there's sort of a musical performance happening.
So just so I understand, right? I mean, right now there's really no interaction after you hit play. Do you ever imagine that you would want to be able to intervene in the performance, or do you want to kind of continue? Do you imagine that you'll sort of continue developing it in this sort of pure form where everything that happens that's live or unpredictable is inside the sort of logic that you've built? Or maybe I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't know, actually. You know.
I mean, I'm open. I consider it versions, and having interactions in the software could also create an element of sort of unpredictability, and you would also account for the audience as like an unpredictability, or like an actor in the software. I've been thinking about these. For example, in one version there was a webcam that would then be projected onto so the audience would be sort of projected into the software as a sort of a self-referencing thing. So there is possibilities of interaction, but I've been sort of keeping it on the minimum, as I consider it I don't want it to be a very interactive piece. I want it to be a piece where there's sort of like it performs, and you're watching it perform. Like it performs, and you'll see what's going to come. More than you can control the performance.
Have you gotten any sort of audience?
I'm way more in, yeah.
Go ahead. You're way more into.
I'm way more interested in the sort of the unpredictability of the software than I'm interested in like in the sort of decision making from an audience or interactivity in there. I mean, you could build all kinds of interactivity into it, and I might do that one day if I consider it to be interesting. But right now, I'm very much interested in building a software that I find unpredictable myself.
It seems really interesting to me that you still have the emotional reality of the performance in that feeling of not knowing what's going to happen and having that visceral emotional nervousness. I was curious too if you had I was curious too if you had any kind of feedback from the from audiences, especially since you're in the streaming situation. It's hard to kind of get the audience that you get in a space. But I wonder if since you have that kind of feeling of being the performer, if you had any of the sort of kind of feelings or information that you get from an audience.
I mean, yeah. I mean, they have to sort of come to me to tell me about it afterwards. So I am always sort of the responsible one for the software. I kind of wanted to. I mean, that's sort of the paradox, you know, that you become the creator of the software, and therefore people will like kind of ask you and relate to you, you know. But I'm trying to sort of create it in such a way that it doesn't. I think you need to see it a couple of times maybe to realize, and it's still not unpredictable enough for my liking. So I'm still working on the unpredictability of it, that it will sort of move further and further away from what I expect.
But some of that, just so I understand, some of that unpredictability is coming from machine learning techniques or AI techniques and not just kind of traditional chance operations? Or how do you...
it's a bit of both.
Okay.
So, because I'm, you know, if you train for a specific, I mean, there's like a possibility space that it has in terms of machine learning. So it sort of trains on an environment for a specific goal, for example, to catch something in the world, in this virtual world, right? And then it will try to optimize for that task, and that task will always be sort of like the way that it will optimize for that task will be different every time, right? So and therefore the performance will change every time. It doesn't have any sort of compositional ideas. I mean, it's more like fumbling around in virtual space trying to compose, which I find like a comedic idea, and I also think that's sort of what I've been doing the whole time. So I think it's fine. And so there's that sort of possibility space of machine learning, and then there is the sort of the more chance-based parts, which I also enjoy, but I want to sort of like slowly increase both.
To add more nonlinearity, more unpredictability to all of those elements.
Yeah, I think the more unpredictable it can be and the more sort of strange and removed from me, the better. I'm not saying that what it creates all the time is interesting, but I also don't think that's the point. Because, I mean, you could say, like, as a human performer, you always sort of, there's always an aspect of seeing another human doing something that is exciting. And here it's maybe harder to sort of reason why something happens.
Well, is that
maybe therefore easier to maybe dismiss the outcome?
I want to actually ask everybody that question because I was thinking about that. But if you think back to yourself as an audience member, was it important to you to see people doing something, or was it more important to you as an audience member to kind of see something unpredictable happen? Maybe the performer doesn't matter. I don't know what your feeling has been over your life as an audience member, Lars.
I think it differs. Like, it depends on the context. I've had both. I've had sort of that I enjoy seeing a certain performer or a certain human or just a human, and I've also enjoyed no sort of that doesn't have to have that, and it's just sort of what happens. So for me, it's both. I'm not exclusive about what I prefer, you know.
Well, I certainly look forward to seeing this performance. I'm excited to see what will happen. Performance as such in our context here. And thanks so much, Lars.